The road trip to Baja, Mexico was one that seemingly refused to happen. After countless postponements, including canceling flights and hotels, and an emotional funeral for my grandmother, I was finally headed west, where I'd eventually end up on the southern tip of Mexico. Coming from Kansas, that's basically driving halfway across North America. I know that sounds wild, but I had plenty of pit stops to make along the way, and let me tell you, I wouldn't have made it very far without the amazing paramotor community bailing me out on several occasions. First, I stopped in Denver at my good friend Jeremy's and noticed my motor had been leaking gas into the airbox, which was just the beginning of multiple motor malfunctions over the next few weeks. While I was at Jeremy's, I sold him my trusty cubic paraglider. The time had finally come to part ways with the wing that started it all. I'd traveled all over the country with this wing, and it never let me down. It's a little easier letting go, knowing it's in good hands, and if I ever get the itch to take it for a rip, it's not too far away. Huge shout out to Jeremy for the top-notch hospitality, as always. Next, I climbed back in my truck and drove west through the Rockies, in hopes to find a solution to my paramotor problems. I punched Moab, Utah into the GPS, and made a few phone calls on my snowy mountain cruise. While brainstorming what to do next, naturally, I found some white-knuckle trails to bounce down. Moab is an endless playground. Despite being my 7th time passing through, I still found plenty of new red dirt to kick up. This road in particular might be one of my new favorites. I've flown over it multiple times, but I missed a few things that can only be enjoyed from the ground. I spent a good hour para-waiting for the wind to die, as predicted, but to no avail. So I packed up and decided to run to my friend Kevin's to troubleshoot my motor. We stared at it for a minute and pretty much chalked it up to, it's a 2-stroke, just run it wide open for a while and it should work itself out. I bid Kevin farewell and drove to one of my favorite campsites at Mexican Hat. I had a pretty special flight plan the next morning, and it was time to work some of the kinks out of my motor. And what better location to do so than the iconic Forrest Gump Point in Monument Valley. I've been here a few times in the past, but the wind has never cooperated.
Okie dokie. Looking A-okay.
It might have been below freezing, but I'd driven 15 hours and still hadn't knocked out my first flight of the trip. If I'm being honest, I was in a bit of a funk. It seemed like everyone leading up to the trip tried telling me it was too dangerous and didn't understand why I'd even want to drive to Baja in the first place. Most of the time, I can't explain the path I'm on, but when it's right, it's right. Even if a funeral, bad weather, and motor issues tried to confirm what everyone was trying to tell me. But if everything went smooth all the time, well, that'd be a boring story. And that's where Parker, Paige, and Christopher enter the picture, who were the furthest thing from boring. A group of professional photographers from different corners of the country. I did a quick flyby vibe check and got the go-ahead signal to fly through their shot. My motor was finally running great again, and I think they were even more excited to see me fly than myself. I had my share of fun and zipped back to my truck with a big stupid grin on my face, knowing I had just flown where Tom Hanks once stood, and that's pretty cool. I packed up and spent a good chunk of the morning talking to the photographers, who unknowingly gave me that spark I needed to continue onwards to Baja. Thanks to these three, I reached what felt like a real turning point in the trip. I still needed a part for my airbox, and I caught word that a guy in Page, Arizona might have what I need. My friend Brad just happened to be hosting a fly-in there that weekend, so that was my obvious next destination. Shout out to Russ for hooking me up with the part I needed to get back in the sky. Horseshoe Bend wasn't supposed to be part of the trip, but it was the perfect curveball that I'd like to think I knocked out of the park. Fly-ins are usually more about getting to know the other pilots, and if you're lucky, you might sneak in an okay flight here and there. But this place was just pure happiness. Yeah, I met a ton of cool guys out here, and the flying was top tier as well. That guy you see flying upside down into the canyon? That's Brad Roper. He flies kind of funny, but he was the reason we were all here. Flights like this are pretty special to me. It'd been a good 6 months since I'd even seen another paramotor in the sky. Sometimes, flying alone back home doesn't even feel real. So it was a nice change of pace sharing the sky among people with a parallel passion for flying. One by one, we each touched back down to Earth. We hung out around the fire for the remainder of the night, swapping flying stories, as we planned our next adventure for the next morning. We woke up bright and early, and geared up to get a closer look at Lake Powell. The lake was rather low, giving us even more room to safely play around. If you've never visited Powell, just imagine the Grand Canyon, dammed off and filled up with water, with rock formations similar to Moab and some of the most crystal clear water you can think of. After a glorious wingtip bump above the Glen Canyon Dam, I spent the next portion of the flight playing Follow the Leader behind Brad. You almost get the impression you're flying on another planet here. Everything seems about as far from normal as can be, but that's part of what makes this place so special. Proximity flying might be my favorite way to fly. It's not common that the wind allows us paramotor pilots to get up close and personal with these massive formations, so we took full advantage of what Mother Nature tossed our way. I guess now would be the time to mention that we had special guest Jim Hamberlin in the sky with us. Jim is an outstanding photographer who could make just about any pilot look good, and that's precisely what he did, in classic Jim fashion. I truly appreciate the photos. Good flying with you, Jim. It'd been a nice long chilly flight, and one last scenic fuel level check told me it was time to bring it in for a landing and say my goodbyes before heading onwards to California. Shout out to Brad for helping me set up the new reserve on my paramotor. I sure wish I could have stayed a few more days. But Salton Sea was looking prime, and I needed to keep moving if I was ever going to make it to Mexico. I was in the absolute middle of nowhere and nearly ran out of gas before tapping into some of my paramotor fuel supply. Yes, two-stroke gas can indeed get you by in a pinch, thankfully. Once I arrived, I met some of the guys from Team Fly Halo. The sun had set, but I had my strobe ready to go. They gave me a pull start, and my new friend David and I both went for a quick after-hours rip along the sea. It had been an 8-hour race against the sun, so making it here before dark felt so good. I had just met David a few minutes prior, but a formal pilot's handshake mid-flight felt necessary. It was good to be back at Sultan. There's something warm and welcoming about this place. I've spent countless hours flying the shoreline, and returning here is almost like being reacquainted with an old friend. The sunsets are always exploding with color, and the air couldn't be smoother. Taking off and landing at 200 feet below sea level is a breeze, even without a breeze. And all the good memories from flying here in the past were enough to make this place a must-stop on my way to Baja. Another day, another flight, and a few more good pilots with great stories to tell. As tired as I was from all the driving, there was an unforgettable full moon rising over the sea, so we went for a late night cruise with the one wheels. We swapped flying stories and eventually called it a night. If there's one thing better than a Salton Sea sunset, it might be the sunrises. I woke up way too early and spent some time by the water before prepping my motor for an epic flight in the surrounding canyons. Then, I bought a few extra liters of fuel off of David to ensure I wouldn't run out of gas again before setting off on one of the coolest flights ever. The wind was perfect for some of that down-low flying that I enjoy so much. I'm not sure why it is, but some flights you simply feel more in tune with your gear than others. And luckily, for me, this was one of those flights.
Alright, I'm ready now, I ain't gonna fall back now. Alright, I'm take it on me.
Cruising the shoreline is always a good time, but I got a shot of adrenaline just thinking about going for a solo mission into the nearby canyons. And before I knew it, I was zipping through narrow passageways like some kind of Star Wars pod racer. There's plenty of lost and forgotten things buried deep within the desert, and I stumbled upon quite a few during this flight. First, I came up on the plateau payphone. That seemed rather out of place. Maybe the desert dwellers used this to call up their buddies for a quick pickup game on the nearby Court of Dreams, I later discovered. Further into the canyons I flew, and that was about the time I spotted what appeared to be a mailbox. I dropped down, and sure enough, that's exactly what it was. I got a wild hair and decided to hook a 180 to land and explore the area. I successfully landed and investigated the mailbox. If you're curious what was inside, you'll just have to go see for yourself. I hung out for a bit and enjoyed my breakfast before the wind switched directions. One thing's for sure, it was definitely a wild berry Pop-Tart flavored morning. I had a tricky launch ahead, and being miles into the canyon, failure was not an option. I quickly noticed the choppy air coming off the mountains, so navigating low back to the sea was not only the best option, but also the most fun. You could explore the endless maze back in these canyons for months and never get bored. I was having a blast just bombing down each little wash, but I also knew I had a big afternoon ahead as well. So back towards camp I flew, while scavenging for more random desert oddities. If landing on a plateau in the middle of nowhere doesn't get you out of your comfort zone, I was about to do something even more extreme that afternoon, which was drive across the border into Mexico. Pretty much all the Spanish I know was picked up from a 7-year-old cartoon character named Dora, so things were about to get real interesting, real quick. I landed to prep my paramotor and my truck, and said farewell to the Team Fly Halo guys. It was time to drive to the border, where I picked up some pesos and crossed my fingers that it'd be smooth sailing getting across. But of course, I got stopped almost immediately so they could search my vehicle. The inspection went smooth. I filled out my immigration form in a dimly lit room full of Mexican military men, and although it was overwhelming, I managed to find this incredible volcano hike that helped me clear my mind and adjust to my new environment before the real adventures in Baja could begin.